Welcome to the Consummate Athlete podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going excellent. It is a chilly Monday morning, but I'm here. I'm excited. How are you?
Also chilly but excited, I guess.
Okay, awesome. Well, it's been a busy couple weeks here as we've arrived back in the snowy north and we prepare for the spring events. We have a few athletes who have already raced, which is exciting and always nerve-wracking for the coach and the athlete coming into it. And then you're about, a month out from your first running event?
Yeah, just about. I guess this weekend it'll be a month out, which is... I will fully admit this has been like a bit of a weird one. So I'm racing a 100-miler, Sulphur Springs. I did it last year as a relay and did a few laps of it. So pretty known course, I would say. So I'm pretty excited for that. But it's that race, of course, I scheduled 3 days before the release of the new Shred Girls book, Lindsay and the Curse of Gemini Lakes. So we have the launch party the weekend after. And frankly, it's all kind of become like this big blur of just like this monster week that's in my brain.
Okay. I recall you saying on a podcast that you schedule your rest weeks to have these big things, and I grimaced a little bit as a coach, but... It's
a lot of logistics is really the thing.
And it is a lot of busy people. It is sort of what they need to do to get through the rest weeks and the downtime, and it's ultimately the only way they'll find the time to do it. So I get it. But as a coach, you're sort of always like, ugh.
Well, it worked out both, like, I mean, yes, it happens to be the week after, but it also works out from like the publishing calendar and, the end of the school year and all that kind of stuff. So
we'll put that link in, but you could probably Google Strong Girl Publishing and launch party or something and find out about this. This is happening in Mansfield, Ontario, just north of Toronto. So if you are in that area or can get there and you have a younger woman, I guess, who would attend this, that would be great. There's also lots of other things happening in the area that day, it seems like, including a running event with N89 on the Saturday.
And we're actually running the kids race.
That's right. You're actually going to have some running as part of this, and there'll be some bike rides and some sort of camp-styled things. So if you're looking for those details, you can check the show notes or, again, Google Strong Girl Publishing, and I'm sure you'll find your way.
Yeah. For our listeners, though, more relevant, the book itself will also be out.
And that's available Tuesday. Everywhere. So there you go. So it's Tuesday in
May 27th.
Oh, okay.
And then the event is the next weekend, the 31st and June 1st.
Sure.
Excited because the book's also available in audiobook, so if you're not sick of hearing my voice, you can get the audiobook for your kids and listen to me read it, while you're on your next long drive to a race.
Okay, and you've come around on that. A lot of parents have said they're actually having the kids enjoy listening to books now, and I guess does it outsource the reading to your kids a little bit, or it's better than TV, I guess?
I don't think so. I think it's just like a different way that kids are absorbing information, and we're learning more and more about how people learn. And not every kid is a visual learner, is like an avid reader when it comes to words on the page, but they're actually like avid readers when they have access to audiobooks.
Sure. Well, I could see, my goal, I don't know if we talked about my New Year's resolution, I guess. I don't know if that's what it was, but I decided to read these 50 classic novels this year. And so it's a pretty aggressive reading pace for me. But Kindle has this very robotic, but I've gotten used to it, this voice that will read the text from the Kindle app. And so I actually will sometimes listen to the voice and then also read along as I do it. And I think it actually does help with retention. And I enjoyed it. So I could see maybe someone who's learning to read, as a child might be, it might actually be a nice thing where they have to read along, but there's sort of this voice going along with them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, there you go. So you could buy 2 versions of the book.
There you go,
I like this. Okay.
Mm-hmm. We'll put all of the links over in the show notes. Okay, so today we have a few different listener questions. These are all kind of quick hits, but we'll dig.
Well, do you want to give a preview? What do we have coming down the pipe, just so people know at the outset?
Some stuff about making structured workouts more flexible, which I really like. Too much cross training versus like what is enough, hardtail versus dually, and a lot of versus. Then we have pack versus vest versus hip pack versus bottles.
Okay.
So we'll hit training first, and then we'll get into gear. So the question around structured workouts is really just how can I make structured workouts more fun or flexible without losing their benefits? to further it. I get bored doing structured intervals, especially when I have to repeat the same workout week after week. Is there a way to keep the structure but make it more engaging or terrain friendly? And there was a secondary question that was around the idea, and we've talked about this before, but doing your workouts outdoors. This person said they noticed that the plans they were trying, these are plans off of Garmin, are not taking into consideration the terrain that I'm riding. So where does one start with this?
Yeah, and I didn't know how to. I mean, both of those could be interpreted odd or differently, in that it could be structured workouts. Period. Just Molly has a running workout she has to do, and it's like 5 by 1 mile, and so that could be a structured workout just because there's a structure to it. It's not just go run for 5 miles. It's 5 by 1 mile. I guess that'd be like you'd run for 10 miles and then do 5 by 1 miles fast in that. Or it could be, do they mean following a structured work? I assume that's more what they mean here is that the Garmin, well, at least in that second variation, that the Garmin is giving them the workout cues, and so you're following a structured workout similar to what you might have on Zwift or something like that.
Right. So you could be in the middle of a descent and suddenly it's like, go hard.
So that's, I think the second one is sort of a, yes, the world isn't a video game. And so I don't know if that's exactly what I don't want to pick on people, but I think what they're saying is like this structured thing doesn't work in the real world. And then I would say, yes, that's why probably you don't need to use it a lot of the time. When we're outdoors, we can generally keep those structured workouts simple. I always joke about 3 and 5. We can count to 3. We have 5 fingers. Probably most workouts could be done in iterations of those, right? Where it's, I guess 3 by 10 isn't quite the same thing, but you have 10 fingers. So 3 by 10 would be like a classic workout, or 5 by 3 or 3 by 5 or things like that. So that's a lot of times you'll see workouts like that because they're easy to remember, and not so much even because of the physiology or what would be the best for the workout, so to speak. But sometimes it's just easy to complete. So I think when you're outside, if you are following something that was designed by one of these indoor trainer softwares, you might need a different plan because it was designed for a smart trainer to entertain you for your hour workout indoors. Whereas outdoors, cycling training is often different. Again, it's 3 by 10, 2 by 20, 5 by 5, 5 by 3, something like that you can remember, or at least write on right on your top tube if it's a little more complicated or you don't remember things well, I guess.
Yeah, and I think this is also the case for, before you head out, actually looking at what the full workout
read your workout before you go out, yeah.
Because I think a lot of the time, like the second part of the question especially, like if you knew that you had to do 3 by 5 minutes hard or 5 by 3 minutes hard, whatever, you would know, like, okay, I'll just start it when this downhill ends.
Right, and so that's what I do. I don't know if you do that, but I choose my route based on the intention of the work. I think you and Sasha on your other podcast just had a 5 high performance habits or something like that. You can go back, we'll link to this episode. And one of those was being intentional.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I don't know exactly what you meant by that, but I assume it meant that you have an intent that you're trying to complete today. And so if I was trying to do a really steady endurance, dare I say, zone 2 workout, I probably wouldn't pick something that goes up and down constantly for that 90 minutes. I'd ride something that I can stay on the pedals and stay in that zone or that range or that power target or whatever the workout is for that period. And then if I had 5 by 3 minutes hill intervals, I would probably find a 3-minute hill or a 15-minute hill or however you want to do this that's going to let me complete that workout. And the beautiful thing, I think, getting to that first question is you sort of get bored. Oh, and it's the same 5 by 3 for 3 or 4 or 6 weeks, right? Because that's good training. You do the same thing over and over again. You eventually adapt to it. But we say same but different is in, especially even in skills coaching, when you talk about like repetition without repetition is one of the big catchphrases. So you can do 5 by 3, but if you're someone who gets bored, it could be 5 different hills. I have people in Toronto, for example, that they have like these 5 or 7 hill route. And is it perfect interval training? No, it probably has too long a recovery between in a lot of cases, but they get 5 hills done. So I think if you're someone who's not going to do it or you're going to do 5 hard hills, I would rather you do 5 hard hills. So just pick the 5 hills. The other thing you could do is just vary. I'll do this with younger athletes a lot of times, but it's good for everyone. It's just 5, say it's 5 intervals and you have to do a different strategy every time. So it could be, steady Eddie. It could be hard start. It could be really easy start. It could be 30-30s. It could be 15-15s, where during your, what did I say, 5x3, you're sort of alternating 30 seconds hard, 30 seconds easy, or 15 seconds hard, 15. So you're just really messing it up, right? And again, you're getting up the hill. You're still going hard for 3 minutes, but you're mixing it up. And then certainly you could just do week to week variation would probably make the most sense, but use a different hill every time. Do a road hill, a gravel hill, a mountain bike hill, or just your 3 local different hills. There's so many ways you can, again, do same but different, or repetition without repetition. And again, this is maybe not what we would think as perfect training in the smart trainer world, but what does this do? It creates an athlete that can go hard for 3 minutes or for any duration on any terrain, and is just very adaptable.
Yeah, and I think I wrote an article about this on our site a couple weeks ago, or a few weeks ago now. I guess that the reality is the best training is boring.
Mm-hmm.
Like, most of your training rides should be a little boring. So I think it's not bad to be bored. I think we're very used to, in our current smartphone society, like
right.
The idea of, boredom is bad, but, I would also try to kind of go inward a little bit and think about, the cheesy, come back to your why during the workout. Right. Kind of have that in mind. It's the same workout. It's because that workout is going to be what's going to get you faster. So I think it's a great time to practice your visualization of your race day. It's a good time to, figure out an unlock on that problem you're having at work. All of those things. But I think lean into being bored. I think if your entire workout is spent super focused on the workout, you're actually missing the mental benefit of that boredom, that chance to visualize, right. All that stuff. So you're actually, kind of missing out.
Well, and it is, and not all of us have all our energy, chips or bandwidth to put into the workout. We're already drained by the time we get to 5 o'clock. So you sort of have to do what you have to do, right? And sometimes it's just, you're going to quote unquote, just go ride and you'll miss the workout. Or as Molly says, it's maybe listening to that podcast or, the really get up and go playlist. But it is that ability to focus. I often say to people, you're doing a 200-mile super boring gravel race called Unbound. I'm sorry, but there's going to be some boring moments and some monotonous moments in there. If you can't deal with an hour on the trainer that's monotonous, right? That's the training, is sitting there with it and the discomfort. When you want to be doing something else, that's literally that you're enduring through something. And the other one that people, when I talk about 5x3 minutes, is there's no hiding if you're doing that right. It is anguish. It is.
Well, I think that's what I was thinking when I was reading the question. I was like fun and not boring. Fun should almost never apply to intervals. I guess. It's a type 2 fun, I bet.
I guess, for sure. It's that when you're done, you're happy and you've completed it.
And again, certainly boring shouldn't either if you're doing the interval right. Mm-hmm. It might feel repetitive, but if it feels boring, you should probably be going harder.
Right. Well, and I guess depending on, again, you could get into the more moderate intervals. Something like a long tempo could get monotonous or boring. But yeah, when I'm doing 5x3 or I do a lot of 4x8s because they're sort of the trendy one, and we have an 8-minute hill. I always joke, it's whatever hill you have is the intervals you like, and that are the magic intervals. But yeah, I'm pushing, right? And I want to go home through most of it, but I persist, and most days, some days it's 3x8 and I go home and then I'm mad at myself, but then I come back and do a good set the next time. And that's the nature of training. They're not all perfect, but indeed it's tough. And so I was going to say they talk about focus, and so you can be focused externally, as Molly said, thinking about a problem you have at work, I guess, or daydreaming or looking around. And they say pros are very good at shifting the focus. It's not that they're so laser focused the entire 100-mile or 200-mile gravel race. It's that they sort of joke around for a second. They space out for a second. They think about something. Maybe they have music or not. It depends on the race or the intervals that they're doing. But then I think the trick is you can start an interval workout a little less focused and not so stressed about the exact power. And then what I like to do is as I get towards the end, the music actually comes off. And then it's me and the breathing and finishing that last one. Because to me, that's the key one, is that last rep where it's I could back off and fade, or I could stick to the power and fight through it and really notice my breathing and am I getting sloppy? Am I covering less ground because I'm sliding out on the gravel, like not getting traction or picking bad gears? So this is really where the money's made. So that's where that last rep is really what you're waiting for a lot of times, and where we would shift the focus to be super focused, but on the same time, giving yourself the grace that not every part of the workout has to be super focused. I actually had a young athlete, and she rode with friends to like the local forest and then did intervals on her own and then met back up with the friends and they rode around for a bit and then they rode back home. And it was like and there was like other friends joined in along the way. And so it was just sort of this idea that, there was super low focus points, not really stressed about what the power or the heart rate was, and then like really focused for whatever it was, 20 minutes. And then again, fun on the way back home. So I think whether you're meeting up with friends or not, there's that room for, exploration or zoning out and listening to your podcast, and then knuckle down for 20 minutes and then zone back out and just enjoy the time in nature, right? And I think when people get bored, it's that they're trying to be super laser focused, and that lasts for about 20 minutes and then we run out.
Training, my friends, is boring.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Okay, next up here, is there such a thing as too much cross-training during cycling season? So this person says, I love strength work and trail running, but I'm not sure how much is too much once my big races get closer. How do I know when to pull back so it doesn't start hurting my riding? Ooh, I like this one. And as a pro cross-training podcast, this is an interesting discussion for sure.
Right. Yeah, Matt Pioro, when I was on the Canadian Cycling magazine podcast, is it a magazine podcast? I don't know what it is. The Canadian Cycling podcast. I don't think it has a name. The running one is called the Shakeout.
Yeah, I don't know what the Canadian...
I think it's just called... Yeah. So I was on it talking about Noah Ramsey and his Zwift Academy win. And then Matt Pyro was picking on me because I often write articles about cross training and strength training and this sort of thing. But then I also flip and say, well, you need to be really specific to your goal. And so he said, what is this? What do you mean by this? And then how does this Noah Ramsey character win on Zwift, but then also win on, Iceman and mountain biking and so forth? So I think the answer is we need both, right? We want to do both. We like cross training. We think, especially for busy people, it's an asset because you can run or do strength at lunch hour or when the weather isn't perfect or you have to watch the kids. It sort of opens up options. And I think as adults, we also should be preserving some of our, we could call it mobility or movement capacity to jump or run or walk rather than being elite level cyclists. I think we believe in that.
Well, and I think you just said elite level cyclists. I think that the main answer for Matt in that case was that, well, Noah was going for a world tour team, which is a little different than a Masters gravel racer who wants to do well in gravel, but also is working a full-time job and has kids and, has goals outside of cycling.
It's true. Yeah. Like a 20-year-old's different, right? And I think we're sort of acknowledging that. But at the same time, I think Noah's training is not that much different. What we did, it would have seasons in the year where he would cross-train a bit more. We did talk about, he was third in the beer mile in between that run of Zwift Academy and Iceman and the World Cups and stuff. So it's not that he lost that a bit. But again, as a 20-year-old, you should be able to do a beer mile and not be, not unable to.
21-year-old, if you're listening to this in the U.S. In Canada, you can be 20 and do a beer mile. Just to be clear.
Sorry, and he's 23, so
We are not suggesting that under 21-year-olds in the U.S. should do a beer mile.
No, he was 23, or I think. I don't know.
Regardless, the drinking age is lower here.
So where was I going with that? So it's sort of like knowing the season. So if your big race is coming, then indeed we would get a bit more specific. Maybe we're maintaining some of those other elements. We're not pushing as hard on the strength training. Maybe the number of sessions or the length of the session decreases. Running would be similar. It's maybe just one or two just sort of short, 10 to 20 minute things. Maybe it depends a bit on how much you run and what that looks like or what the cross training is. But the question, I guess, would be, sort of answered in those interval sessions we were just talking about. If those start not going well, or you're never doing intervals, but then you're getting ready for a race, but then you're not really ready for the race because you weren't getting ready for the race, then that would be where you're probably cross-training too much, because now you're going to perform less well because you weren't preparing for the race. You weren't riding the race bike on the race terrain at speed, relevant to the race. So I think that's the mix you're looking for, is where do you fit it in? And it does become a logistical challenge because you want to protect. We have Dan Cleather coming back on here soon. He has a book on strength training coming out. And one of the interesting things is like planning the week. Where do you put strength training in a hard charging endurance athlete's week? Because their biggest concern is that they're going to be sore in their main sessions. So you need to find time in the week. So this might be you do the interval session in the morning, the strength training in the afternoon, or the day after, so that the main session, that key interval session, isn't affected by the cross training, or which will include strength training in. So that would be the idea. I don't know. Do you think there's an answer there? I don't know if
I think so, and I would also add to that. I think like the ideal is actually, well, maybe you could disagree with me, but I think for me the ideal has been having, kind of a maintenance version of everything where every single morning I have the same like yoga, planks, core routine that I've done almost daily for 9 years now, I think. Might be even more at this point. But it's like, my 12-minute, 15-minute session, and that ends up being, almost 2 hours of body weight training every week, body weight, mobility, all that stuff. And that stays in no matter what time of year it is. Like the only days I won't do it is if I'm running more than 20 miles, like right out of bed. So I won't do it on race day. But I would do it the day before race day because like I've built to where that's just my normal everyday thing. And then the other strength stuff comes and goes, and how much I'm lifting goes up and down depending on what's coming up, all that. But I think having at least that minimum viable strength, just so you don't drop it completely, because I think the problem is always like people hear that and then they just drop everything and focus on cycling for a month, and then they end up kind of like back a little bit. Now they're like, they have to lift lighter, they don't feel as good, then they're not doing the problem is, I think a lot of people, myself included, strength training and mobility are kind of combined into one thing. So a lot of people, if they drop strength, stop doing any mobility work, stop doing any yoga, stuff like that, and that actually does impact their cycling negatively. So I think finding that like 10 minutes a day maintenance mode is probably like the number one thing I would do. And then everything else can kind of go up and down at will, but at least you have that built in. And
it's sort of this belief, in 5 years, I think we'll see it even more so that strength training is just a part of really every endurance athlete's week. Like we're going to believe a bit more in it and see that it does help with power production and if not resilience and injury. Certainly the clientele we have that are menopausal, postmenopausal, that group seems more into keeping it in the mix year round, but it is still hard, even for that group that, where it is sort of the, I guess I can say trendy thing, but the important thing, I think the meaningful thing as well and beneficial thing around preserving muscle mass. So I don't know. I think the main answer to this question is like, how do I know that I'm cross-training too much? We want to believe that really, assuming you're doing what you want in your goals, you can have a big mix in that. You can be quite, have great capacity. We have friends like, Ryan Atkins would be like the obstacle course where it's all very mixed training and a lot of strength training. And then the guy jumps into gravel races and mountain bike races and obstacle course races and running races and skimo races. And so I think that's really our belief, is that you can build this really great endurance capacity. And then if you do have the strength training in there and the stuff that's keeping your body healthy, then you can really do a lot. But again, if you're trying to be Noah Ramsey qualifying for a Pro Tour team, that's very elite. But most of us are just trying to jump into stuff and have a good event here or there, maybe do the local group ride. So it's very puzzle. So I think that's the ultimate thing is, are you achieving your goals? Are you getting the workouts done that you want to or need to for the event? And I think that would inform what your decisions then as far as how much cross-training you're doing.
You also just kind of dropped in, you kind of casually said belief in there. I do think there actually is like a pretty deep psychological component to this, where it's, if you think the strength training or the trail running helps your cycling, it's going to help your cycling. If you see it as a detriment to your cycling or taking away from your cycling, it's going to take away from your cycling. So I think part of it is also like, placebo effect yourself here. Like, believe that the strength training is making you a stronger cyclist. And I genuinely think that's a big part of like how you end up being a stronger cyclist.
And I will say, you know, the one thing that gets missed in, I guess, our philosophy is this idea of like, I guess it's within 80% as a passing grade, but also a Dan Cleather, you know, 100%, you know, it's 100%, but it's, how does it go? It's, much of the training process is spent purposefully not going 100%. So not maxing out, and that could be volume, that could be intensity, whatever you're doing, not maxing it out most of the time. So most of the season, we're not at full capacity. We're not dropping, vomiting on the side of the trail. We're not riding as long as we can, running as long as we can. So what I see in this cross training, or dare I say consummate athlete, is that the runs just get a little too long. The strength training gets a little too high rep and a little too long. So when we're talking about, you know, beautiful strength training, it would be under half an hour strength training sessions. So whatever you get done, reps, probably mostly under 5 or 6. You know, so this is more on the max strength, if you will, side of things, but not so much that you're so sore all the time. And then with the running, you know, 5K to 5 miles is the bread and butter of most of it. You know, Molly runs a lot more than that, but running is her main sport, and she is a 100-mile runner who has built up over years. And then with biking, like we talk a lot about 90 minutes to 3 hours being the sweet spot. So it's not 5 hours. It's not, you know, 7 hours. It's not 200K. Not that can never happen. It's just the bread and butter week to week of that consistent training is built on these, we call them unremarkable workouts. No one's going to be impressed by your 5K, you know, but that you just little bricks. And that's what builds that, you know, you can go and do whatever you want. You can be specific for a few weeks and then go race in a mountain bike race or go race in a half marathon trail running race. But if you, every weekend is a half marathon trail running race, this is where we end up with issues, right? Where you get injured.
Training, my friends, is boring.
Okay.
Before we get into the gear questions, quick shout out to our sponsors, our good friends over at Payable. So this is the easiest way, the only way to take payments within a Google form. It is the most convenient thing if you just need to quickly collect some money, whether you're planning a bachelorette party or a baby shower, you're collecting money for the local Humane Society, you're me and you're selling books in real life, or you're running just a registration for a single event and just don't need any bells and whistles. You know, you're walking dogs, you're even trying to set up like a coaching subscription service or anything like that. You can do it with Payable, and the best part about it is, A, they're our good friends. We trust them, so that's why we are more than happy to have them sponsor it. We believe in them. We believe in Payable. And B, if you are a teacher or any kind of like athlete type person involved in the athletic community, when we started working with Payable, we helped them develop a ton of the templates that are free to use for Google Forms. So a lot of the stuff that you're looking for, you know, Girl Scout cookie subscriptions, pizza day at school, you know, like I say, club registration, event registration, t-shirts, all that kind of stuff. There are free templates for it. So you're pretty much, you just got to throw in some names, some photos, and you're good to go. You're off to the races, possibly literally.
Okay, and if they use our link, they can save on the Payable fees. And I believe if you use Square, you can also save on Square fees for a little while here. So what is that link?
PayableApps.com/athlete. And I will add, when we say Payable fees, Payable only makes money when you do, which is the other bright side. So if you're just starting something, or, you know, again, you're collecting money for something that like you don't really want to start a side hustle or a whole business or a whole website, you know, this is just a really easy way to do it without spending any money up front. So again, payableapps.com/athlete. We will include a link in the show notes, so definitely check it out if you're trying to figure out how to collect money. Okay, our gear question, we have hardtail versus dually. So this is someone asking, they're a bit of an older athlete doing a single track 100-kilometer course, and they're just wondering, you know, hardtail might be faster, but dual suspension is going to be a little cushier. Which would you go for?
It's tough. I mean, now I would say that pretty much for everyone, the dual suspension stuff is so efficient and so light that it's rare that you, especially on 100K, that you could say that it's faster, unless, this is all assuming that you have the very light dual suspension. If you have a very clunky dual suspension and your hardtail's a much better bicycle, then it's going to function better, and then the weight at some point will be relevant because most of these 100K mountain bike races have hills in them. But you would want to be careful that over the course of the longer duration, you don't get beat up and lose time on descents or whatever, right? It's just the dual suspension just lets you pedal across bumpy stuff with very little energy spent, whereas a hardtail, you have to, for an hour race, you can be up out of the saddle and hovering and absorbing the loads. But if it's bumpy routes that you're pedaling over for hundreds of Ks, then it gets old. But even in XCO now, in the Olympic cross country, you're seeing the World Cup, it's very rare you see someone on a hardtail anymore in the actual cross country event. Sometimes they'll bias in some of these events towards the weight. If it's at altitude, it's very climbing, or for the short track because it's important. But for the rest of us, usually even at something like Leadville, you're seeing people using the dual suspension bikes most of the time.
Now, that said, we are shopping for a new mountain bike for me, and we are thinking hardtail.
Yeah.
And, for me, we've had this discussion, we've been talking about it for a long time now, and part of the reason that we're thinking hardtail for me is because, to not put too fine a point on it, is I'm not the most technically apt rider. And yes, dual suspension lets me get over more, but if I have a hardtail that's lighter and I'm actually able to keep up easier, faster on the stuff that I can ride quite well, it's actually playing to my strengths to have a hardtail, whereas the dual suspension would be playing to my weaknesses. So it is that technical versus,
sure.
And again, this is where we're trying to be, budget conscious. So we're not going to splash out, 10 grand on the lightest dual suspension. That would probably be the best choice. But if we're looking at a budget bike, hardtail is actually.
And so, in line with that, you're not racing likely, and you do like to climb. So, as you say, I think it's fine to say this is the type of riding I like to do. A lot of the places you ride are more pine forests, fairly smooth places anyhow. Mm-hmm. And then you also are going to use the bike for a bunch of rail trail, almost gravel. So this bike is essentially a gravel bike with flat bars. It's like a race hardtail, but then
realistically is where gravel bikes seem to be going anyway. So.
Yeah, and then now the wrinkle that you're getting is that this bike also has a bit of, with the carbon frames flexing and that sort of stuff, it has a bit of, I'm going to say isospeed decoupler because it's that's what it is. But then also with the tire size getting bigger and dropper posts and inserts, there's a lot of things you can do with hardtails now to make them more comfortable and more, when you go over, have to pedal over routes, that you actually can do that.
I'm trying to decide if we say isospeed decoupler 3 times, who appears?
It's always Gary Fisher.
That's who I was thinking.
Yeah. So I think for this, if you're looking for just the short answer is rarely in a mountain bike race, is it not better to take a dual suspension, assuming it's a reasonable quality and not, again, a really heavy dual suspension, that you have a really good hardtail and then a really bad dual suspension. Dual suspension itself is not going to be faster, but assuming the weight is not very much more and the bike is efficient and up to date, then usually that's the way to go almost, always.
And the second part of this question, reading into it, it's also he spent more time on the dual suspension, less time on the hardtail. His question is really just that the hardtail is newer and nicer is sort of the thing. However, newer and nicer does, if you're doing the plus minus sign or equals, the little triangles, I don't know. I would pick the bike that feels more comfortable rather than the bike that just happens to be newer or a little more modern. You're used to the dual suspension. That's what you're training on. That's what you're riding the most. Yeah. Guess what? That's what you should ride in the race.
Sure. And so, what you would do, some people will do stuff like this. This is akin to, I think what the hardtail is becoming is akin to a single speed. People, I'm going to ride this on my single speed for a challenge. I'm going to ride 100K. I've done the race before. So that would be a reason that someone might do it. And then what was the other thing you would want to do is just test it. So if you're thinking, maybe this might be a good challenge or something I want to try, or I think I'm going to believe that this is faster for me, then do your preparatory rides on it and give it a test and see what it's like. And usually for something like 100K, you'd want to get through a 50K and then ask yourself, could you do that again? Would be what I would do maybe 4 to 8 weeks out. for sure and test that out. But if I was going to run a hardtail, then I would definitely look at inserts and the biggest, pretty big tires, assuming the course is technical, right? If this was Leadville, it's less of a concern from that perspective, but I would do that definitely with a dropper. And then the other thing they're doing now is the bigger forks as well, right? And so we might even look at that for Molly is a little bigger suspension fork too, to just try and give it a bit more downhill capacity, I guess. So there you go.
Stay tuned on that.
So I think the short answer is dual suspension, but do whatever you want. All bikes are fun, so have fun.
There you go. Okay, last question here is pack versus vest versus hip pack versus bottles. And this is specific to the bike because I was going to say I could have a whole episode on this that's more on the run. My problem is it depends on what works for you.
Yeah. So body type and
body type.
How long you're going. So there's like those different things. Like some people, their body just won't like one of those things for whatever reason. Like I couldn't imagine wearing a hip pack riding, and I don't know if that's related to the way my hips are designed or what.
Side, though, you run with a hip pack, and I would never.
Not a hip pack. I run with a
waist belt, whatever.
A belt.
But like that's the equivalent.
Yeah, but then I've convinced myself because all the fast trail running gentlemen will use belts. So now I'm like, well, now I need to use this belt.
Whereas I find them so uncomfortable, I could never. I would say to finish the running version of this is I would highly recommend not running with a bottle for anything over like 5 miles, say. Just because like the one hand holding something heavy does just kind of throw off your stride and stuff after a while.
I don't know. They seem to do it a little bit in races, but yeah.
I think they're probably draining the bottle very quickly.
That's what I'm wondering, yeah. And then they end up carrying an empty one or stuffing that or tossing it.
Tossing it at the next aid station, right? Like, so again, they're probably not carrying it for more than 5 miles.
It could be, yes. So they have like 2 and there's one in a pack. And then I think Walmsley at Western States had like a modified belt where he could get 2 into the belt or something.
And I'm going to come back to
Why aren't you just using a pack?
I'm going to come back to what Zoe and Kylie said on our nutrition episode back at the beginning of the year, which is just because an elite runner or rider is doing it, that does not mean that it is the right decision.
I'm just using everything that Walmsley guy's got. I'll buy it all.
Yeah, but you have an elite body type, so I think you're pretty okay.
I also listen to what Courtney DeWalter does.
Okay. You're going to get some big shorts.
Big shorts and the DeWalter Tailwind. They have the watermelon flavored one, I guess.
There you go.
Yeah, anyhow, that's a trail running digression. So I would say with the bike, definitely vest would be what my suggestion would be. Anything. I really like Camelback's chase vests, but I see those USWE ones are really popular right now.
Veloce just came out with a vest.
Really sleek one. So you're seeing sleeker ones for the gravel world that are more aerodynamic, I guess.
I actually kind of want to get my hands on it for running because I think it would actually be a pretty decent run vest.
It looked pretty good. Yeah. So, and those are good people. So, yeah, so you could check those out. And I do like the vest. So the vests sit higher, and then you have access to the pockets in your cycling jersey, presumably of pockets. So they're really nice. And I've had really, really good luck with that Camelback chase vest. I need to get a new one because mine's getting pretty beat up.
Is that also on the list of things we need to get before the 100-miler, or do you don't run with that one?
I'll just run with a belt, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, remember? Everything Walmsley does, that's what I do.
Okay, well, when you're bonking and I have to, drag you to the next station.
Maybe I'll do a belt. That would be the other thing is I could do a belt and a pack.
We also need to check on the muling situation. Can you carry my stuff?
Yeah. Lots of things to do. In any case, it does depend. So in that case, if I was supporting when we were doing Molly's run, I was going to use a big pack so that I had lots of room for coats and extra bottles and that sort of thing. So again, it sort of depends what the goals are. If you're running quickly and that you can fuel frequently, that would be where bottles are popular. I've been really liking the trend now seems to be towards bigger bottles. We didn't talk about that at Sea Otter, but that was something I saw on a bunch of pros bikes, and then also I bought some big, they're 900 milliliter, so just short of a liter.
You were so influenced at Sea Otter. It was very funny.
Figured you got to support people. Tough times.
No, I like it.
Tough times. So those are really great, and so they don't fit into every frame size, but they are nice to get more water on the bike in bottles, and then you don't have to use a pack, especially for training. I think it's good. It's maybe asking a lot that your bottle's you're gonna blow a liter of water off your bike instantly when you hit bumps. But that's really the main thing is in the race or the ride you're doing, how much water do you need, and can you get between the aid stations, and do you want to stop in the aid station? So it's this mathematical challenge of the fuel and the hydration, And then does it make sense? So I really like the vest. Even in gravel races, I often am one of the few people using the vest because I just do not like my bottles getting popped out, and I can drink whenever I want. And when I need my fuel, it's right there, or the tire plugs, they're right there. So it just sort of keeps it all nice and centered.
I cannot stress enough the like being able to drink. I think people do not realize, like, especially under pressure, it's very hard to get your bottle out to drink enough and then put it back.
And I would say, so my test, if you wanted to screen, should I use a pack or bottles in my gravel race or mountain bike race especially, almost more, would be, can you ride no-handed? And I would say if you're not riding no-handed comfortably, like even on trail, I didn't tell you to do it, don't hurt yourself, but if you're not very comfortable, I would say you're going to find a pack for these endurance events, especially, just hugely performance enhancing, because you're actually going to be able to drink and get the stuff into you, right? Because it's one hand to just put the straw into your mouth.
Okay, so to recap, no beer miles if you're under 21, and no riding no-handed on trails. We do not recommend.
Start in a safe environment, but that is one of our screens. We've talked about that before, is just, can you ride no-handed? And it's actually no-handed around a right-hand, or not a right-hand corner, but a 90-degree corner. Like, can you go around a corner, safe, no cars, whatever, but do you have control of your bike riding no-handed? And this is a lifetime goal, we always say, but this is a good screen of, as far as bike skills, control of a bike, balance on a bike, and a room that we can all improve. But when we're talking about hydrating, getting your hands onto bottles over technical bumpy terrain, perhaps with people all around you, you're going to find that pack is really, really nice. And the fact that your bottles aren't as important when they explode out of your frame is super performance enhancing. So there you go. And then I think the hip pack, maybe for coaching or enduro style stuff, that's usually where you see the hip packs. You don't see hip packs like, a fanny pack. They call them hip packs so that they're more cool. You don't see that in racing. In endurance racing as much. I can't think of anyone running races. I'm sure there's people that do, but it's usually more for the enduro style of stuff, and trail riding or coaching and first aid is a lot of those people will use it really well for that. But yeah, not so much in the speed and endurance side of things.
Definitely, yeah. Well, and I think, for some women, they might find that more comfortable if, like, the vest is sort of uncomfortable with the chest situation, in which case, yeah, hip packs can be fantastic. But yeah, they're definitely not my first go-to. All right. Well, I think that wraps our questions. So if you have any more for us, racing season has started. We kind of want to hear how it's going for you. So definitely hit us up over at consummateathlete.com, at consummateathlete on Instagram. And if you haven't already, do us a huge favor. Take 2 seconds, rate, review the podcast. Super easy. Wherever you listen to it, there's usually a button to find it. If you're struggling with it, let us know, and we'll give you the step-by-step instructions. I think we even have them pinned on our Instagram page. So it is so appreciated, as is, of course, just tuning into this show every week. So we appreciate you, and happy training. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.